gonna finish this damn book. Turn the page is the chapter. A Dogon village in the Bandi Gara is made up of a small cluster of mud huts. Each settlement is spaced about 8 to 15 miles apart along the river's edge. Upon arrival, the chief greets you at the encampment's broad border, where if he likes what he sees in your eyes, he welcomes you in. If not, you keep walking. I was always welcomed. Having just coming off filming Reign of Fire, I had a shaved head, a big beard, and was in sturdy physical shape. Upon coming to Mali, I told Isa and anyone who asked me that I was a writer and a boxer by profession. With no electricity in the Bandi Gara, nobody recognized me from my movies, and they were not very interested in me being a writer. They were, however, very interested in the boxer part. Word started preceding my appearance in the village. A strong white man named Duda is walking these parts. One day, after I showed up at a beautiful village called Beg Nemato, exhausted from the 14-mile hike to get there, I lay down on the ground to stretch my legs. Two young men soon approached me, stood above, and started talking at me, not to me, a challenge in their tone. A crowd began to gather. "What is it they say?" I asked Isa, who sat near. "They say they are the champion wrestlers of the village and want to challenge strong white man named Dauda to a match." I continued to stretch on the ground, measuring the situation, when suddenly the two young men ran away in opposite directions. As the crowd worked into a frenzy, I looked up, and now standing above me was a large shirtless man, much more able-bodied than the two before him, with a burlap bag roped around his waist. He pointed down at my chest, then to his own, then off to his right. The crowd amplified another notch. I turned my head to have a look at what he was referring to, where I saw more excited villagers, all surrounding a big dirt pit. I then glanced at Isa. He smiled. "This is Michael. He is the real champion wrestler of the village." My heart began racing. The crowd roared. That's when I heard my own voice whisper in my ear, "Take the challenge or you'll forever regret not knowing. Leave your scent." Slowly I got to my feet, now standing eye to eye with Michael. I raised my right arm and pointed at his chest, then back at my own. Then I turned and walked toward the big dirt pit, and the villagers went apeshit. Quote, "Some people look for an excuse to do, others look for an excuse not to." I'd always been a fan of wrestling. I followed the WWF as a kid and had decent leveraging skills, defending myself as the youngest brother of 3, but this was different. I was in the middle of rural Africa, 95 miles from the nearest telephone line, standing in a big dirt pit, in front of a well-built native African man wearing a burlap sack for pants. What were the rules? Could you strike, bite, fight till the last man is standing? I didn't know, but was about to find out. Michael and I stood face to face, the chief of the village circling us. A bead of sweat began to run down the back of my neck when Michael swung his right arm to my left hip and secured his hand to my shorts. Then he looked me in the eyes and nodded. I took this to mean I should do the same, so I did, and got a firm grip on the left side of his roped waist, and then grabbed a handful of my shorts on the right side of my waist. I mirrored his move, our faces now inches apart, the crowd decibels rising again. Michael lowered his forehead into the soft spot just below my neck above my collarbone, and I burrowed his brow in. I followed suit. Both our arms attached to the other's waist, our foreheads bored into the shoulder girdles of the other, ear to ear, we began to back our feet away from each other into an interlaced horizontal plank position, then dug our feet into the sand to get anchored. All I could see were 2 tree trunk thighs bulging in front of me, braced for attack. The chief rested his hand on our heads like a baptism. Then he quickly lifted them. He yelled, Tot, which I correctly took to mean ding ding. Round 1. Head to head, we spun in a few circles, measuring the other's might before, it's actually Michelle, I think, lifted me up and into him. My chest to his face, then body slammed me to the ground, knocking the wind out of me. 1 for him. The crowd howled as he quickly mounted to try and pin me. On my back, I swiveled, trying to evade his grip. Then I whipped my hips upward and swung my right leg over his head and back under his chin and slammed his head backward to the dirt. 1 for me. For 3 to 4 minutes, we circled, flipped, and smashed each other to the ground, but neither of us was able to pin the other. Finally, the chief stepped between us and broke up the battle. Dripping sweat, now hyperventilating, I raised my hands over my head to try and catch my breath. Blood ran from my neck, mixing with shards of my beard that had been ripped away from my face in the friction, my knees and ankles bleeding. Michel was, with barely a glaze of sweat on him, stood upright, staring me down. Not a happy man. That's when the chief held 2 fingers to the sky, and the crowd pushed the limits of hysteria even further. Face to face in the middle of the ring again, we took our positions, hands to hips, heads burrowed ear to ear. We dug in and let the baptism begin again. Tot. Round 2. Back home in Texas, my advantage as a wrestler was always my strong legs and ass. Here in Big Dirt Pit, in Africa, opposite Michelle, I was reminded that I was no longer in Texas. More aggressive out of the gate this round, Michelle immediately came on the attack. Maybe it's Michael, I don't know. I slipped his first takedown and drove him to the ground, face first, mounting from behind. I employed the reverse of one of my favorite WWF childhood moves, the Boston Crab. Just when I thought I'd exhausted him, he somehow flipped me off his back, and the next thing I knew, I was gasping for air, leg locked between his tree trunk stumps. Now seeing stars, I fought to twirl my hips and release his latched ankles. With Michael's legs still locked around my waist, I managed to climb to my feet, his arms bracing him from the ground. I twisted and turned until I felt one of his sweaty legs lose its grip and begin to slide around my stomach. This was my chance. His death clench now weakened. I pushed his legs downward, slipped out of his squeeze, and dove up on top of him, where I got my left arm around his neck and fought to set a headlock. Unable to establish it, but still maintaining leverage, I remained coiled up with him on the dirt until we were both absolutely exhausted, a stalemate. That's when the chief stepped in and called it. We slowly got to our feet, and the chief escorted us to the middle of the Big Dirt Pit, where he raised both our hands to the sky in victory. The crowd wailed. Both of us sweaty and spent, but only me a bloody mess. Michael and I were peering at each other in post-fight regard when he lowered his eyes and suddenly bolted out of the ring and sprinted away from the village. The crowd, which now included everyone in the village, enveloped me with the chants of Dauda, Dauda, Dauda. That night, alone on the straw mattress, I lay on the roof. Shh. That night, alone on the straw mattress, I lay on the roof of a mud hut in the Dogon village of Begne Mato in the middle of Mali, Africa, staring into the heavens, where I counted 29 shooting stars cascade across the sky. Dreaming with my eyes open, I watched as the constellation of the Southern Cross revealed itself to me for the first time. Like the radiance of the luminescent cluster of butterflies I'd come upon on the Peruvian trail to the Amazon, I was now in the cradle of another truth. It was divine intervention, an extraterrestrial transmission of cosmological facts indeed. A celestial suggestion. More like a direct ordinance from God, and I was the chosen one in his church. Remember this, I avowed. All because I chased down a wet dream, literally. Green light. As I began serenely dozing off into my dreams of superior sanctity, my peaceful breathing was casually interrupted by a blocked nasal passage, my own. I sat up and snorted a healthy amount of mucus into my mouth, then readied to hurl the sizable mass of coagulated phlegm off the rooftop. The launched loogie made it no more than 5 inches from my curled tongue before it boomeranged back and straddled its oyster-sized snot ball across my face. I'd forgotten about the mosquito net I had put on my head earlier. Unbelievable. Nothing will bring you back down to earth like spitting a loogie in your own face. Believe it. Alright, then he's got this little black page, kind of a side story thing. Unbelievable, the definition. Adjective. Not able to be believed, unlikely to be true. So great or extreme as to be difficult to believe. Extraordinary. Not able to be believed. What a foolish word. A rude and disrespectful word. We think we use it to flatter and give credit to. What an unbelievable play. What an unbelievable film. What an unbelievable act of courage. What an unbelievable sunset. What an unbelievable break. Why would we define things that are incredible and awesome, things that actually make us believe in them more, with this pillar of antinomy, something spectacular, phenomenal, outstanding, and most excellent is most definitely not unbelievable. Awe-inspiring, magnificent, prodigious, and extraordinary, yes, it just happened. You just witnessed it. You did it. Believe it. Unbelievable? Quite the opposite. Give incredible more credit. A man flies a suicide jet into the World Trade Center. The coronavirus comes. Hurricanes ravage. Fires burn. Enron's a scam. The government lies to us. Our best friend lies to us. We lie to ourselves. Our fiancé says, I do. Our child says his first words. We find a cure for cancer one day. We die in peace. Unbelievable? No. It just happened. You just witnessed it. You did it. Believe it. Acknowledge the existence of greater and phenoms, excellence and extraordinaries, pleasure and pains. Recognize them as our true entities, both beautiful and horrible, tragic and heaven-sent. Be not naive to awe-inspiring feats of good or good fortune, nor gullible to mankind's capacity for evil. Be not blind to the credence of natural beauties and disasters. Nothing God or Mother Nature does is unbelievable. And if there's one thing you can depend on, people being, it is people. Don't act so surprised. Unbelievable happens all the time. Sometimes it's divine, and sometimes it's a logic in our face. Don't deny it. Oh, sometimes it's a loogie in our face. Don't deny it. Depend on it. Expect it. Believe it. There's this page that I'm not sure I can even see. The next morning I packed my rucksack and said goodbyes to my new friends before heading out on the 15-mile hike to the next village. At the perimeter of Begnamato, a man stood waiting for me. It was Michel, or Michael. Without a spoken word, he gently put his palm in mine as I approached and proceeded to walk with me the full 15 miles to the next village, holding my hand the entire way. When we arrived, he released me, silently turned around, and walked the 15 miles back to Begnamato alone. Later that night, I said to Isa, I have to talk to you about yesterday's wrestling match. How did I do? I think I held my own. Isa chuckled to himself, then said, No, Duda, you did very well. Everybody think Michael going to have strong white man named Duda on his back in no more than 10 seconds. Really? I asked. Yes, really. Michael not only champion of this village, Michael champion of this village and 3 villages back. Ha! So I won. That's why the village all chanted my name afterwards. It's not about win or lose, it's about do you accept the challenge? Issa said as he looked at me and smiled, when you did that, you already won. You come back, Duda. You make money. We make money. I did go back 5 years later. Michael had 4 kids, and a busted hip by then, so we didn't have another wrestling match. But he still held my hand and walked me the 15 miles to the village the next day. Wet shit, I had left my scent. Green light.